On Deck is an online education company that just announced it raised a $20 million Series A round of financing from a very impressive list of investors. Today, I'm going to tell you why On Deck has the potential to transform education, and why that isn't quite as optimistic as it sounds. You ready? Let's go.
Wouldn't it be?
All right, On Deck raised $20 million from an incredible list of investors. It includes the SPAC king Chamath Palihapitiya, Learn Capital, one of the biggest education investors, and many more. For those who aren't in the industry, let me tell you, this is a big deal, and it makes them one of the hottest education companies around. They announced this raise through a post on their website, but the only reason I heard about it was because they also announced it concurrently through my favorite newsletter, Not Boring by Packy McCormick. He's a Duke grad who writes about big trends in the investment world and the internet. I'll link to his post about On Deck below, and it's well worth the read. For those who aren't going to read, let me try to summarize. From their website, On Deck is where the world's top talent comes to connect. Whatever it is you want to do next, our ever-growing community and action-oriented programming will help you get there fast. If you want to learn something new to up-level your career, launch and scale your big ideas, or make lifelong friends, this is the place for you. Sounds pretty awesome, huh? This is how they describe their programs, which are the fundamental product they provide. Our programs are 8 to 10 week-long virtual fellowships that provide community, education, support, and momentum to supercharge your path forward. This all sounds interesting, but it basically sounds like they run short online courses around accelerating your career path. And look, I'm all about community. I'm all about lifelong education. I'm definitely interested. But actually, Packy McCormick describes their business even more ambitiously in his newsletter. According to him, On Deck is building a modern, digitally native education platform at a fraction of the time and cost of traditional higher and continuing education. Okay, now you've got my attention. I've written about the exorbitant costs of higher education before, and ever since I met Caitlin Donnelly, I've known that the avalanche is coming in higher education. Could On Deck be that avalanche? Packy goes on to describe all the ways in which this business is unbelievable. The amazing talent they've recruited to their team, their early profitability in a space that's notoriously hard to be profitable in, the technology stack that has allowed them to launch new programs amazingly efficiently. They've launched like 15 new programs during the pandemic itself. The incredible network effects that their approach to community is creating. At first, I was blown away. They're growing incredibly fast and had the team, network of investors, and ambition to be a future powerhouse in education. I had been skeptical of On Deck before, but I realized after reading Packy's piece that most of my skepticism was due to my own biases and didn't stand up to scrutiny. In fact, many of my complaints about On Deck could also be made about a lot of higher education. Here were a few of my dumb complaints. First, On Deck is way too expensive for an 8 to 10 week fully virtual course. Their courses cost anywhere from $2,000 to $12,000. Are you kidding me? Then I thought about it. Well, let's see. Let's look at higher education. I didn't see them exactly cutting their exorbitant tuition rates when they went virtual, and their prices make On Deck look like a bargain, even adjusted for the time that they spend. My next complaint? They're all about cultivating an aura of scarcity and using that scarcity to get more and more people to pay their exorbitant fees. Again, I came back to higher education. What exactly is the model of Ivy League educational institutions? My next complaint. They're growing too fast instead of getting their product right first. Then I remembered. Move fast and break things was literally the internal motto of Facebook. Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, is famous for saying, if you're not embarrassed by the first versions of your product, you're launching way too late. I mean, Grow fast or die slow is pretty much the unofficial motto of the entire Silicon Valley software culture. This complaint is best dismissed by saying, don't hate the player, hate the game. Okay, fine. I can be a bigger man. I can admit I was wrong. Maybe On Deck is the future and I need to start embracing it. But there was one criticism in my mind that lingered. One criticism that I couldn't dismiss so easily. They don't seem to care about the education they provide. That should be a damning statement for a company that is so clearly in the education space. But it's obviously not given their incredible trajectory and the powerful investors they have on board. I mean, in Packy's analysis, there is no mention of the actual education they provide through the programs. And Packy actually went through one of the programs himself. Listen to how he described his experience. When it was time to leave Breather and really go for it, I decided to do what an increasing number of founders do, apply to On Deck. I got in and joined the second cohort in New York. I remember getting into the Slack, joining the intros channel, and thinking that I was so far out of my depth. On Deck put together one of the most talented groups of people I've ever been a part of. Turns out, On Deck was a lot of the things I was looking to build: education, community, network, friendships, and career opportunities. I made friends and connections in On Deck that I still talk to daily. Now take note of that language. One of the most talented groups of people. Made friends and connections he still talks to daily. That's impressive in terms of community building, don't get me wrong. But it doesn't say a damn thing about the education. And notice the investment thesis that Packy lays out. The talent, the profitability, the technology, the network effects. Again, no reference to the education they are providing. Even on Deck's website, the references to the educational aspects are few and far between. The main outcomes they tout are the fact they've had 1,400 fellows who have collectively founded 330 companies and raised over $250 million in capital in the last 18 months. I mean, as far as outcomes go, this is one of the more obviously inane. I mean, what exactly did On Deck do to contribute to this success? Did they pick highly successful fellows, or did they really accelerate their path to founding companies in any meaningful way? Now, I'm not saying measuring the actual outcomes is easy by any means. Look at higher education and the lack of meaningful outcomes there. But 2 points. First, we have to be able to distinguish between orders of magnitude. We're talking about a fully virtual 8-week course. That's closer to an Airbnb superhost taking credit for the number of their guests that had gone on to found companies and raise capital than it is to a higher education institution. Second, my mom always says 2 wrongs don't make a right. I'm not looking for the disruption to higher education to just go after our money in different ways. Technology offers so much incredible potential for learning. Given On Deck's tech expertise, they should take that as a challenge worth taking on. There was a tweet thread from Nicole Williams at Compound VC that summarizes my thoughts really well. New organizations that primarily sell community and have a sudden spike in growth, cult-like in-group, and obsessive recruiting is such a red flag to me. The On Deck Fellowship is a good example of this. They sold themselves as a credentialing org to some degree before they actually fully figured that aspect out. And so the burden was on the students to self-defend the school's name in perpetuity so that their credential held value. And then she quotes another person saying, "I hear an awful lot about how great it is, but not how it is so great." Think about that. And before I go further, let me describe my own personal experience. A while ago, I was looking for some structure to help me possibly write a novel. I came across the On Deck Writing Fellowship that was launching and thought to myself, oh, this could be interesting. It sounded like they were trying to bring together ambitious writers and support them in an intensive process that might get me where I wanted to go. There weren't many details, but hey, it seemed like some really smart people were involved. For someone who had built a life out of climbing educational ladders, this sounded like the next badge of honor to help me get where I wanted to. I applied and crossed my fingers. While I was waiting to hear back, I heard mention of this other program called Creator Institute. Let me walk you through the 2 processes as I went through them concurrently. Applying to Creator Institute, it was open to anyone who filled out the application. It cost $500, $300 if you were a student, and all you had to do was have an intro call with Professor Eric Custer of Georgetown, who ran the course, and he made sure it was a good fit. The On Deck Writers Fellowship advertised their extreme selectivity based on the need to manage their cohort size, and they charged $2,000. Despite touting the curation of their cohort, there wasn't even an interview process. They took a 5-minute first-round application with a couple short answers for a second-round application before letting me know I was accepted. I personally reached out to set up a call. So I had a call with both. My call with Professor Custer was great. He talked about the program, how it was structured, the commitment I'd have to make, the flexibility it offered. He showed an interest in my topic for the book and gave me clear, concrete answers to what I'd be doing. He talked about the author's success rate going through the program and how the process would be difficult and challenging, but one I could be successful with if I made the commitment. My call for the On Deck Writers Fellowship was very different. I learned very little about the actual program because it was coming together on the fly. There was no commitment to do anything. It was more of a you get what you put in model. And it seemed like I was just being encouraged based on the people that had already signed up. Ultimately, this should have been a slam dunk decision, right? Creator Institute was a quarter of the price for twice the length and had been a more engaging process. Going through the On Deck application process made me feel like they were just looking for the most impressive LinkedIn profiles that they could get to pay. Yet the allure of scarcity is really hard to capture. Despite what I just shared, I agonized over this decision. I made a list of pros and cons, and it wasn't until I talked to my wife about it that I made my choice. If I remember her words, they were something like, this one seems like it's exactly what you're looking for and it's cheaper. Do that one. I won't rehash my experience there. I've written about it. But long story short, Creator Institute is the real deal. They offer a structured curriculum that breaks the book writing process down into bite-sized pieces and give you the resources and motivation to make it through the journey. The curriculum over the 20 weeks isn't perfect, but it's very solid. I'd give it an A-. The thought that's gone into it is evident to anyone involved. The journey is a mix of inspiration through an active speaking lineup, education through weekly sessions with Professor Custer, and perspiration through the library sessions and writing workshops that you need to attend. The course manages that mix to get first-time authors to the finish line, and their results speak for themselves. I don't know why Professor Custer doesn't shout these results from the rooftops, but I believe it's something like 90% of participants finish a first draft manuscript, which, for anyone who knows about the attempt to write a book, that's incredibly high, especially for a program that's non-selective. And it made me think, wouldn't it be awesome if On Deck cared as much about their learning outcomes as they did about growing fast? If they took their role as educators seriously and not just their roles as community builders? If they put as much thought into the learning in their programs as they did on their growth? If they looked just a little more like Creator Institute? It's incredibly frustrating that it seems like the hottest education companies from an investment point of view are often the ones where we talk the least about the education they provide, where we avoid talking about the learning outcomes, the efficacy. I hope you don't listen to this and think I'm trying to bash On Deck. I think their growth has been incredibly impressive. I love the engagement and activity of their community, and I love the ambition in their vision. And look, maybe they actually also provide an amazing educational program within each of their 17 courses, and that's just not what they or others have focused on. I find that hard to believe, but it's possible. Or maybe they haven't yet, but they plan to improve that as they are hyper-focused on winning the market first and believe they can improve the educational program later. Given the plethora of educational resources out there and the talent they have on board, that's definitely a reasonable proposition. Especially if they can continue fundraising so impressively, they might just be able to acquire a company that could complement them in the right ways. In fact, that's what makes me so hopeful. I think getting the curation right is so achievable, but it takes aligning your vision and strategy to that goal. So I'm hopeful that On Deck celebrates this investment round and their investors push them to do the hard work of getting them to achieve their potential. You know, everything always comes back to my tennis career. Once, I remember excitedly telling my tennis coach, the legendary Joe Brennan, about how I had overheard another coach say that I had a lot of potential. I expected him to share my excitement, but he didn't. Here's what he said: "You should never be happy to hear you have potential. Potential is something latent, something undeveloped. Hearing you have potential should piss you off. It should motivate you. Potential is something you could become, but haven't chosen to yet." So in the spirit of Joe Brennan, let me say, On Deck has the potential to transform education.
Wouldn't it be?